attorney who's going to speak to us tonight.
If you think I need the mic back there, let me know, okay? I'll be glad to use it. I have kind of a loud voice sometimes from practice. Good evening, everybody. I don't recognize any faces right now. Maybe I will in a little while, people who are interested in this case. But I've been here before when they had the paranormal people here talking about certain things, and I was in the audience, and that's how I became invited here tonight. So I consented to come because you never know. Sometimes even when we're speaking to people, there are people who are involved, and they tend to show up even, so you never know. So I'm perfectly happy to entertain anybody's views when they want to talk to me later on about this. If you have any information that you believe is inside information or good information, I'm still investigating this case, so I'm quite ready to listen. Just a side note, we have probably now in excess of 40 legal boxes of documents filled with information, amongst which are many, many boxes filled with people who've contacted us, people like yourselves, who say, listen, I have this or that and the other thing. And many, many of them go nowhere. They don't really have, they imagine that they know the killer and they don't. Or they imagine, they had a dream and they want me to follow their dream, that sort of thing. So, but we follow everything. We do trace down whatever we can. And we're not a big firm to be able to do that, but we do. We try, and you never know where it leads. You remember son of Sam, nobody knew. And he turned out to be what he was, a butcher's helper or something like that. A postman, that's what he was, yeah. A postman, who knew? So you never know, all right? We start with that, okay? So what I guess I would do is just briefly tell you how I got involved in this case and then take you through some of the evidence that you're probably lately quite interested in with the new developments that have come out of the police department last week. So, I was the lawyer for one of the victims in the Medford pharmacy shootings, if you remember that. 5 people got plugged by a bad guy and his wife outside, and they asked me to speak on behalf of the little girls who lost their mother. And I did at the sentencing on behalf of the girls. So one of the reporters who was there covering that, who was a friend of mine and knew me, he saw me there, he said, come on over, guy from the Daily News, and he said, there's a lady that needs your help. She's not getting help anywhere. And that was Mary Gilbert. And he said, come, are you willing to step in and help? And I knew the story from reading Newsday. I didn't know more about it than that. And up until that point, this was in December of 2011, Shannon's body or bones had been found, but there wasn't a lot more information at that point. Everybody else had been found before that. And the real case hadn't gotten started. So the Commissioner of Police Dormer made an announcement in late November, early December, that Shannon had drowned. And they made that announcement when they found her jeans, pocketbook, cell phone, wallet, and the top of a perfume bottle laying in more or less a circle area about 30 yards directly behind the home of Peter Hackett, Dr. Peter Hackett, in a marsh called Oak Beach. And they made that announcement that she drowned before they had located her bones. They had only located this evidence, and from that, somehow, bizarrely, they came up with this theory, the police. So right after that, the bones were found, several days or a day or two later, I've forgotten. And when the bones were found, they then said, well, she probably still drowned, but she could have died from the natural elements in May of 2010 in the marsh because she got confused, lost, and probably was on drugs. And so she just died. I mean, how many of you people who are in your 20s, I'm looking at you tonight, think that you would go into a marsh on May 1st and find yourself in the temperatures which are high 50s, early 60s, and drop dead? Right? Not too likely, right? So that's what they said. They said she died of natural causes. When that happened, Mary needed help. And that's when I stepped in. I met her in a bar along with the Daily News reporter. And I agreed to do only one thing. I said, listen, this is wrong. They're clearly not doing their job. What you have to do is get to the FBI and get them involved. And since it's a wetlands, they would have jurisdiction. Since at least one of the prostitutes crossed state lines, that would have been Shannon, in order to service somebody that crossing state lines for crime is a federal offense. It could bring the FBI directly into the case. So all we have to do is ask them. And the only way to ask them is call a press conference and announce and demand that the FBI step in. That's what we did. And I promised that's all I was doing. We didn't know anything more than that. So we held a press conference at the site or nearby, and it was a cold day in December, and that was it. That was the end of my role, I thought. All right. But then Detective Vincent Steffen, who was a homicide detective for Suffolk County, and also the vice president of the Detectives Union, wrote a letter to me and said I was all wet, I was wrong, how dare I insult the police kind of letter. And they had done all kinds of great and wonderful things, including that they had Black Hawk helicopters borrowed from the FBI flying around looking for the bodies. So I'm all wet, you ought to know what you're talking about, you don't. It was a hostile letter, all right? And then I said, okay, fine, he can think what he wants, what do I care? And then he went and published his own letter in Newsday, the letter that he sent to me. So now he puts it out in the public, okay, that I'm a jerk, basically, all right? Now you have to understand, take a look at my face. I'm Irish. Okay? And I don't take that laying down, all right? He just ticked me off. And because he did that, I said, I'm stepping in. And so I then stepped in, went with the family to the autopsy meeting that took place in March of 2012. And that was a show unto itself. Again, the police, bizarre behavior. It's the only autopsy ever that the police department sent detectives to attend the actual meeting. 3 detectives sitting there with their arms folded, which is a sign of hostility very often, right? And the medical examiner and the assistant medical examiner who did the work. And the family, myself and some of my assistants were there. Every time I asked a question, and I didn't know at that point, I wasn't, imbued with the facts, so I just was kind of curious about what they had to say. I didn't know enough to ask all the right questions, so I would just ask a little question about the hyoid bone in the neck, that sort of thing. And she would not answer. She would get up, walk over to the detectives, whisper with them, come back, and then answer. And they're supposed to be an independent agency. They're not supposed to work for the police department. So right away, everybody, the whole family's hackles were up. We knew that this was wrong. And it's just not the way it's done. It's not the way it should be done. She told us at the meeting what was on the tape, the 21 or 23 minutes, depending on who you listen to, tape that Shannon made of 9/11, or they made of a 9/11 call of Shannon calling in when she runs out of the John's house, out of a guy named Joseph Brewer's house that night or that morning. So what Vincent Steffen wrote in his letter completely directly contradicted what the medical examiner said was on that tape when we were there in the meeting. She told us one story, the police told exactly the opposite story in writing. And they're sitting there together. How could this be? Something's wrong there, all right? Again, I wasn't ready yet to really start fighting because I didn't know much. I just wanted to hear. So what the police said in writing was that on the tape, Shannon could be heard, but she was calm, there was no excitement, everything was peaceful. What the medical examiner said was just the opposite. There was a struggle. You could tell there was heavy breathing, and there was excitement, and she was excited in her voice. Well, it can't be both, can it? Right? It just can't be. So already I know we're in for it. Something's up here, So, all right, so one other thing I noticed, when they gave us the spread of the bones, when they do that sort of thing, autopsy, they lay out all the bones. So you see a picture of the skeleton just as it would have appeared if there was skin on it. And there was this little bone about that big, shaped like my fingers are now, called the hyoid bone. It's right in here. And when you hung, if you get hung, when you're lynched, all right, that bone cracks and it immediately pierces the nerves in your neck and kills you instantly. So people often, when they're hung, when they're lynched, they don't die from suffocation. They die from this snapping of that bone. All right, so here's the bone, and what was interesting was, to me, I didn't know much about the hyoid bone at that point. I had been involved at that point I was probably in about 20 different homicide cases I've been involved in, but I don't remember any of them being involved with the bone. So I'm looking at this little picture of the bone, a tiny thing, and I notice that in the picture, there's a hole in the center of the bone, in the base of the bone, that goes right through it. All right. But you couldn't see that the hole went right through it in that picture. You could only see an indent, and there was some notice about it in their writing, that they noticed an indent. So I asked her, medical examiner, what is that hole in that bone? And she said, she probably had a growth in her neck that grew into the bone, and it's just an indent. Okay? Maybe, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. So the other problem with the bone was that there's normally two little horns sticking off the side of the bone, one on each side. They were missing. And I asked her, how did that happen, that they're missing? And she said, probably little animals ate them in the marsh. She was also missing the fingers of her left hand, the digits of her left hand, except for one, I think. And the right hand was intact. She was missing toe bones. And they said, well, that's what animals do. They come and they nibble them away and take them away. Okay? Fine. Now I needed to study that, right? So that was what happened at the autopsy, but you could tell we already had a problem for a variety of reasons. So now I said, this doesn't make sense, any of the story about her drowning or dying of natural causes. So on May 1st, 2012, I went into the marsh following the route that the police had laid out, that they said she probably followed to get to her bones. And I went in with a young woman who was the same size and shape as Shannon, and with my partner, my law partner, in tow. And we were told by the police that it was all filled with terrible things. There were rats, and there were deep waters and quicksand kind of thing. And what Dormer in his Irish brogue said, there are sticker bushes there, So I said, all right, we've got to. So we bought Vietnam era fatigues. We did, and we got iridescent boots because we were going in at 4:53 a.m. And I don't want to get eaten by rats or whatever. But we wanted to test it. We made sure we checked the conditions of the weather were the same, all right, as they were 2 years before, and or a year and a half before, and 2 years before, right? And the time we went in was exactly the same time as she made the call, or she finished the call at 4:53 a.m. So, sure enough, once we got in, we made sure not to follow any of the paths carved out by the police from over a year before. They chopped down some of the weeds and whatever. So we just went through we made sure to go through the reeds as if Shannon were doing it the same way, to test it. And we found that there were mosquito canals that were here and there with boards over them in various places, and they were about that deep. Everywhere else, the water was, if there was any water at all, about that deep, or some places no water at all. And we found where we could see they had put flags. We could see where the other evidence was in the circle behind Hackett's house. And then we continued on and we found the body, or not the body, the place where the body was found, sorry. And all through that walk, you could see to your right, all the houses. The houses, you could see people in the houses having breakfast with their lights on at that time of the morning. You could shout out and they would have heard you. So the idea that she shouted and nobody heard her, or that she didn't know where she was you could walk to the houses. On the left side, as you walked east, that is to say on the north side, you could hear the tires on Ocean Parkway as people were going to work. So where she's finally found is it's sort of like a giant triangle. It spreads out from where she entered to where, as you get toward the bridge, the Robert Moses Causeway, she's found there up that way. But she's only in about, I don't know, maybe 20 to 30 yards in from the roadway. So how could she possibly have died of the natural causes because she got lost and confused and just plopped down and died, which is what they were saying. That was absurd. And she didn't drown. She was found face up with her head on a bush. So none of that story was true. Why were they lying about this? Now, to this day, there's no answer to that. But that happened. So we were able to, 48 hours, filmed it. They came in with us and walked it with us. And so we have a record of all of that. So that now stirred the whole thing and my involvement. I then went into Oak Beach, knocked on doors, and we went to Joe Brewer's house, which was empty, so I went in it, looked around, got an idea of what really happened, knocked on doors, ended up on knocking on Peter Hackett's door. His wife answered, came to the door and said, yeah, he'll come out and talk to you, just wait here. And we did, and he never came out. She said, here's my lawyer's number, call him. Okay? But as soon as I knocked on Hackett's door, no sooner did I walk down to the next house, and I was talking to a fellow who was up on the balcony, then some man came raging out of a house and screaming at us and told us, get out or we'll be arrested. And he was the vice president of the association and lived across the street from Hackett. So they didn't want us there. And I didn't want trouble, we left. But the man I was talking to said, oh yeah, I said, did you know about this? You know, and he said, yeah, my son knew about it. My son lives here. And or it was his nephew, I forget which, it was a relative, anyway. And he said, yeah, she was knocking on doors over here. And then when he realized who we were, myself and my law partner, he said, oh, I better not talk to you anymore. So we left. And that's, now I'm moving further into the case. Skipping over, we get to October of Sandy, and I'm over in Denmark, and we know that the statute of limitations is about to run out to sue Dr. Hackett because of all the lies that he told and his wife told in writing, as well as on national television, about what he knew and what happened. So we figured the only way to keep this investigation alive, because the cops were doing nothing, was to sue Dr. Hackett, because he seemed to implicate himself, and go from there. But we had only about, I think, a day or a half or so to get the whole complaint ready, and I was overseas. So we got it ready over the phone, and we got it served on the day during the hurricane. We served him on the day that the statute would have expired. We got it. So that's how I'm in it. Kind of crazy, right? So we did that, and the case has been going ever since. So during that case, I've managed to take the testimonies of Dr. Hackett 3 times, videotaped it. I took Mrs. Hackett, I took his children, I took the guy who was one of the board members who was in charge of the gate where the video was. I took the depositions of 2 neighbors who claimed that they saw footprints on the deck of Barbara Brennan that were Shannon's footprints in the mist. I took the deposition of Barbara Brennan and several other people, and we took affidavits. So I've done a huge job. I then eventually took the deposition of Joseph Brewer and 2 depositions of Michael Pack, the escort driver who brought Shannon there, and God knows what else happened. So we have plenty of information, tons of information. Took many, many hours. I took my time in deposing them, pretty thorough job, and got as much out of them as we can. And I'm telling you now, I don't care what really happened, who knows, but those people are lying. Every one of them are lying. They are not telling the truth. And I have the evidence to prove that. They contradict each other on substantial issues throughout their testimonies. And in ways that are actually remarkable. I never expected that to be. People make mistakes, people forget. Nobody tells the complete truth. You don't, I don't, nobody can. You can't remember what I said 5 minutes ago exactly. You can't sit there and say, he said, because when you do, you're not telling the truth. Even though you think you know, you don't. That's how we catch you on the witness stand all the time. We can make ordinary nice people look like complete liars, okay? Because people can't really remember. They bias what they say. They color it, their minds color it. That's what I expected to encounter. I didn't expect to encounter intentional lies, but I did.
What would have been their motive, though?
I don't speculate. One of the things I try not to do is conclude without more evidence. And my rule is an old rule for, I guess, investigators and lawyers who do litigation as I do. And I'm not just a criminal lawyer, I do much more civil work than criminal. Evidence, evidence, always evidence. Inference, yes, you can make all kinds of guesses, but that's all they are. Never fix yourself and say, that's it, I got it. Because you don't know. And I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and say, absolutely, this is what I think this is the killer. I'm not doing that. Because I don't have this positive evidence of this or that. I don't. I have circumstantial evidence which can be very strong, for which you could be convicted of a crime, even on circumstantial evidence. But we don't have anybody saying, I killed them, and he did, or she did. We just don't have it, okay? So I don't do that. Anyway, so once we started the case, that enabled me to investigate and to take the depositions of all these people and to get further and further into the case. There's 1,000 things I could tell you about all of that, but maybe, we only have, I don't know how long is this thing?
Until you're done.
I don't know, you'll go to sleep and all that things, I know, you will. Go ahead. Sure.
Thank you so much for your time. Did you run a deposition on any members of the Scalise family and also the young man who I believe lived between your houses in Scalise, who allegedly was fishing that morning by Barbara?
Yeah, we know who he is. I met him. He would not give us a statement. The Scalises, I took several statements from both the young man, Joe Jr., and his father and his mom. They're completely opposed to Hackett and the others that are there. They think Hackett did it, and they are adamant about that. So they're enemies. But they were enemies before this case over other things in there. So they have their biases, but they were helpful. They were very helpful people in the case. But I didn't know that Joe Jr. was a marijuana grower in New Jersey who got busted eventually for it. I didn't know that at the time. I had no idea of that. But they were helpful. They certainly were helpful. They wanted to get to the bottom of it. They had their biases. So.
If you had a news conference,
I can't hear you, sir.
if you had a news conference to hopefully bring in the FBI, did the FBI do anything?
They did not. We wrote to the FBI as well to ask them to come in. I wrote to the United States Attorney Department of Justice to ask them to come in. We were ignored. We had no response whatsoever. We learned later on that the sparkling chief of police, James Burke, deliberately, intentionally discouraged the FBI from being involved in any case in Suffolk County, not just ours. That's right. And that he was suppressing that. So it's an inference that he suppressed it in our case. All I know is they didn't step in. So that's the answer to your question, right? So basically what's going on up from 2012 until now is that the only one running any kind of a organized investigation besides the police department is me. All right? And I you know.
That you know of.
That I know. I mean, there's a lot of people who, you know, they're internet people galore. You know. I've been getting people from India telling me what's going on in Suffolk County. You know. So you know, that's happening, but we're the only ones that have any authority to keep going, and that's what we're doing. So I could say that once I started taking depositions, that community closed like a clam, and it's not a nice place. You might say, "What? How dare he say that?" I have no problem saying it. I've investigated a lot of people there in that community. How many of you own boats? Few of you, right? One or two? Not a lot. Okay, good. So you're poor like I am. I'm not rich, believe me. Not with this case, believe me. It's all pro bono. So if you don't own a boat, but you know, if you go off the coastline in the Great South Bay, down by Jones Beach Inlet and all that, or you go off of Shelter Island, right, or Block Island, or the Long Island Sound, people tie their boats up and they party, and they smoke dope, and they snort, and they have all kinds of wild sex parties, and they do all kinds of stuff. Not everybody, but there are plenty of people who do that. Why? Because everybody knows, if you know anything about it, it's free. There's no cops. Nobody's checking you. You do whatever you want. Well, Oak Beach is a boat, but it's just not floating. Okay? That's the truth. The people who moved into Oak Beach, they're from this, you know, all you people that look like me, right? No more hair, that kind of thing. We grew up partying in the 60s, right? All the hippies and all that, and the 70s, and they all moved into Oak Beach. Party land, okay? So there's not a lot of nice people there. There's all kinds of weird people, and they do all kinds of strange things. Every one of them? No. But many of them? Yes. That's why they're there. And they're a gated community. They lock the gate, and anything goes. And we found out anything goes. Okay? So don't be surprised that you have a situation like this in that area. And that's the way some of these beach communities are. You know, the surfers group that went, they all moved in there. They all thought, oh, this is great. We died and went to heaven. That's what this is about somewhat. More than that, I don't know. But I do know that. So as I'm going along investigating and finding out about this weirdo and that weirdo and all the things they do and trying to pin down what's useful and what's important and going through all of this, one of the things I do, 3 years ago now, I think, is I subpoena the 911 tapes. Now there are 4 of them. There's Shannon's 21, 23-minute tape in which she supposedly says, according to the police, they're trying to kill me. Right? And there's a tape by Mr. Gus Coletti, who's now deceased. She knocked on Coletti's door. He was near the gate, and he called 911. She then eventually knocked on Mrs. Brennan's door. She's down towards the water, and she called 911. And then finally, a day later, bizarrely, Joe Brewer called 911. So there's 4 tapes that we know of, 911 tapes, and the police won't give them up. So they fought me. We tried to foil them, and when we foiled them, they fought us, and the judge took 1.5 years to decide the case. Former policeman, the judge. And finally he decided, well, we can't have him under FOIL, but you can have him if you subpoena the records. More or less is what he said. And why did he say that? Because while we were waiting for the decision on the FOIL, the appellate division in Brooklyn decided in a case involving Suffolk County that when somebody's involved in a civil suit, they're entitled to the 911 tapes whether the police are investigating or not. So I said, great, bam, here's your subpoena the next day. And from that, they now fought it. And they lost. Eventually, it went bounced from one judge to another judge. Judges kept recusing themselves, so that takes time. It got stalled. Then Mary Gilbert got killed, so I now had to substitute her estate for Mary in the case. And Mary was Shannon's administratrix, so we now had to substitute an administratrix for the estate of Shannon Gilbert. All this, we had to go to New Jersey because Shannon lived in New Jersey. We had to get an order from a Jersey court to do all this. We then had to go to the surrogates court here, and it took forever. I mean, we're doing all this work for free. So it really became very complicated. By the time it all worked its way out, we were down to a year ago, October, when a new judge, Justice Berland, got a hold of it, and he decided in our favor and said, give up the tapes. Why? Because the police department essentially did two things in their papers, which they submitted to oppose us getting the tapes. One, they said the tapes are part of an active criminal investigation involving Shannon, so we don't give them up. And two, they lied. They outright willfully lied in their papers, and they said that the tapes were productions from the get-go of the police department. Everybody should know the police department does not run 911. That's a civilian operation. The police had nothing to do with it. And when those tapes were made, the police weren't even in this case. Those were all made the night that they disappeared. There were no cops. But they lied to the judge, and he caught it, and he wrote on it. He caught it because I pointed it out, but he caught it.
He was quick.
He was quick. All right, and so he mentions that in his decision, and he mentions that they never came forward with an explanation of how, in what way this is involved in a criminal investigation. And he ruled, as I pointed out, that the contrast between their two press conferences that they held where they said this is not a criminal investigation, she's not connected to any homicide, and now they're coming into court and saying just the opposite. He pointed that out as well. So I finally won, and then they played some dirty tricks, some slippery tricks the county did, legally, procedurally, I won't bore you with, which stretched it out, took more time, and then they appealed it. And once you appeal, everybody says, how come you don't have the tapes? Well, once a government appeals a decision of a court, there's an automatic, by law, injunction against enforcing the order. So, if you win a judgment against Suffolk County and they appeal it, you're not getting your money until it's all over, okay? If you ask for relief saying, direct them to give me the tapes, which is what I did, they get an injunction against that until it's over. So they knew that. So they appealed it a year ago, November, and we submitted our briefs. They then went, by the time I had my briefs in by January, everything was done. I had it all done, bam. Right? It was in November. By January, it was all done. They asked for adjournments about 4 or 5 times, each time basically misrepresenting that they had new staff, they couldn't service it, and they needed more time. And they dragged it out all the way until October when the court finally said, well, the appellate court, we'll hear it in January. That was supposed to have taken place Tuesday, this past Tuesday, okay? That's yesterday, right? I'm having a hard time remembering where I am. But I don't drink a lot, believe me. I'm Irish. So it was yesterday they were supposed to decide that. The interesting thing is we wanted to argue the case in Brooklyn like you normally do, but because it involves a discovery issue, discovering an item in the case, they don't grant oral argument on that. So we couldn't argue the case. We have to wait for the judges to write their decision and then give it to us on the motion. I have a lot of confidence that we're going to win, but I always have confidence in my cases when I lose. So, I can't promise you anything. I have absolutely no faith in the courts whatsoever, zero. And it's gone from 0 to minus in my career, in my lifetime. Go ahead.
What's the relationship of James Burke and Spoda, and what was going on with that issue?
20-year-old?
There's a lot of speculation about whether James Burke was part of what's going on at Oak Beach.
Right.
My sister.
You have to go back to 1979.
Right.
And I don't know whether those are just rumors or whether there's any substance to it.
They're rumors, they're inferences as well, but we don't have any substance yet. What I can tell you about it, and I don't mind telling you, the public should know. It's part of our pitch to the court. The public should know what's on those tapes. Yes. Because I have much more faith in the public than I do in the courts. All right, and people on the internet, some of them are brilliant. So, it's good to have the public involved, right? And witnesses come forward when the public is involved. So to answer your question, as to Bissett, the police held, Bissett hit this, when Bissett committed suicide on the anniversary date of one of the girls being found, the internet went crazy. The bloggers went nuts all over the country. Bam, 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 bam. He's the one, he's the one, he's the one. Because he was a wholesaler landscaping company, very big one, and he had burlap. And 4 of those girls were covered in a burlap something or other, okay? So everybody said, aha, that's him, okay? The police got so excited about it that they finally called a press conference and said, we are telling you that Bissett is not a suspect and has nothing to do with this case. And one police officer said, I will give up my house if it turns out that Bissett's involved in this case. That's what he said, okay? I won't tell you, because I don't. It wasn't in a press release that he said it. Yeah, well, they did do that. Yeah. Well, Bissett was a character. He belonged in Oak Beach. All right? Pardon me? Well, he was, and here's where it comes in, okay? Bissett, they said it was not involved. So what do? I said, okay, they say it. I tend to believe the police. I tend to agree with them because I've tried cases against them many times. And most cops have integrity. They're heroic. They're brave. They're good people. All right? And they're smart. And they suspect everything. So I tend to like cops, even though I kill them when I can on the stand. Okay? But I do. I have respect for them. So it was very hard for me to swallow that they were doing such a boneheaded job here. But it is what it is, right? So what about Bissett? Well, it turns out in my work that I find out that the man whose son claims he saw Shannon, that's Justin Canning, he actually saw Shannon at Barbara Brennan's house. He claimed that to the New York Post, and they reported it. What was his name? Kieran Crowley of the New York Post reported it. Kieran's now passed away. So many people have died. Gus Coletti's dead. Well, he said he had seen Shannon, right? And that she had walked and disappeared. And then he changed the story. But his father is a landscaper. And all he does, his father, Tom Canning, is landscape for Oak Beach. He sits on his stoop, drinks beer, and once in a while does some work as a landscaper. So I deposed him because he claimed to have seen footprints, not Shannon, but footprints in the mist on the deck of Barbara Brennan, going toward the water. Okay, and he thought that those footprints were slippers, or he called them ballerina shoes. Okay. Okay, so I took his deposition. When I started to ask him about landscaping, he revealed that he was very ticked off at a guy named Bissett. Why? Because Bissett is a wholesale, and he would go to Bissett at his place in Huntington, I believe it was. He had, several, Medford, Huntington, And he would ask Bissett for, trees or whatever to plant. And he had a relationship with Bissett. But he was mad because in the house next door to Barbara Brennan lived a family known as Aversano. The son died of an overdose of heroin. And he was the best friend of Charlie Hackett and of Justin Canning as well, the boy that died. That house was landscaped in a retail fashion, right? Trees, plants, by Bissett. And he took away Canning's business. So Canning was pissed. And he says so under oath. And I'm saying, wait a minute. Wholesalers on a Long Island scale that as big as Bissett's nursery would do retail work and compete with their own customer? And in all places, we're not talking about Manhasset, the Gold Coast. We're not talking about Great Neck, right? We're talking about Oak Beach, right? Which is sand. This guy happens to be in that community? That was bizarre. That then raised my hackles. You had a question?
Yeah, in reference to this, was Bissett's phone records cross-referenced to the...
I don't know about Bissett's records. I don't have them. The police have all kinds of information we don't have, and we just have to rely on the hope that they're doing their job, I know they have a full room in the in headquarters devoted only to this case. Wow. And they've had that for years. So they are doing something. I don't know. But, well, yeah, they're busy doing a lot of things. I don't know. Some of them are working hard, I suppose. I don't know. Ma'am?
Who allowed a wayward home? If you're claiming that Oak Beach was a bunch of weirdos and bad people, who legally allowed a wayward home in that area?
There was no wayward home.
They said it was a wayward home.
No, Hackett made that up. He made that up.
It was a big joke?
It was not a joke. He was sick.
So he lied that he made his home.
A home for wayward girls. Yes, he lied. And that never happened. I don't know why it wasn't investigated, but it was not. I did. There was no home for wayward girls. So, that's another, if we go down that path, we will in a minute, hold on. But we have to finish with Bissett. So I then, by sheer coincidence, a girl disappeared for several days. She was missing, a young woman, and supposedly she was last seen in a cream-colored SUV driven by a guy named Charlie. So Peter Hackett is Charles Peter Hackett, and the bloggers went nuts all across the country. It's him. He took his next girl, and the girl popped up 5 days later and had nothing to do with it. It was all just craziness. But the girl happened to be a former client of mine. And I had represented her family. And when she was a little baby, I represented her mother. And now she was grown up, I represented her. And now she disappears and comes back. And I call her up and I say, so-and-so, what's going on here? Everybody says you were involved with Peter Hackett. She says, no, I was with my boyfriend. That's his name. And we had a fight. And we went away for 5 days and came back. But, she says, I happen to know Shannon Gilbert. She was my friend. And so I said, is she making that up? A lot of people make things up. So I had to question her, and I came to the view that she knew a lot of inside information that she wouldn't have known unless she knew Shannon. And she points out that Shannon was not unfamiliar with Long Island. People think, oh, she came from New Jersey, she knew where she was. Shannon's been many times on Long Island, if you believe this person, and she would work out of the hotels, the Marriott, the Garden City Hotel, and she would try to break into the rich man's market out east, and one of her boyfriends was Bissett, according to this person. Okay? And she had another one, a millionaire up in Kings Park. We don't know who it is. But that's Burke area. So, anyway, so I have these things that tell me that Bissett is probably connected. I also have information firsthand from somebody who traveled out on Bissett's boat. Bissett was one of those boat people, and he would go off to Babylon, and they would have these wild parties with something known as the Wet and Wild Girls. You figure that out. And on that boat was Burke. So Burke and Bissett knew each other. They were connected. Okay, so there's a lot of these people who are connected. They're connected through sex. They're connected through drugs. They're connected through all kinds of weird activities. And they may not have anything to do with it. That may be just a large coincidence because they all like sex. I don't know. But it's an interesting connection anyway.
John,
Ma'am?
was there, that person you had spoken to, that woman, had she mentioned anything about Ohika and Milius?
No. I looked for that, but no, I didn't get that. Although I got other people connected with Ohika. So the synapses, the nerve endings that come together are all over the place. It's very hard to follow, you know. But you had.
How do you spell Bissett?
Bissett.
Can you speak of James Burke's relationship with Thomas Spoda dating back to 1979, John Pius?
Yeah,
Are you aware of that?
I was around then.
Yes.
You know, I was in law school. I just got out of law school, I think, when the trial came. So I kind of was, and I was in Suffolk County politics at the time. So I knew all the players. I just didn't know them really well. But that little boy had rocks shoved down his throat because he was going to allegedly report these bad kids in Smithtown for stealing a bicycle. I think I heard, I don't know if it's true, but that they were actually also burglarizing homes, and he would have really nailed them. And so they waylaid him on his way home, and they shoved rocks down his throat and killed him. One of the boys who was part of the gang was Jim Burke. And he turned evidence on his friends. Not that that's so bad in this case, but it's just very consistent. And he turned evidence on his friends, testified against him in a grand jury, and they got convicted. All right. So, and the district attorney handling the case, assistant, was Tom Spoda. So Spoda then promotes Burke because allegedly he thinks he's just a sparkling kid who's just going to change his whole life and move up and became great and went into the police academy and became a cop. So Spoda then gets out of the DA's office and goes into practice where he represents the Detectives Association and the PBA. So he gets all their divorces and he gets all of their criminal, everything. And so his practice grows enormously and he becomes Spoda, Sullivan, and O'Rourke. And they had left the DA's office as well. Jim O'Rourke is today the lawyer for Dr. Peter Hackett. And I've been fighting Jim ever since, okay? In any event, Spoda works his way up and has a really great living and then decides to become the DA. And, he runs for 2 terms unopposed by any political party, which to my mind you can see is a great mistake in America, isn't it? Side political comment, but you can see the results of that. Power tends to corrupt, as Lord Acton said, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's what was going on here. So Tom works I never had any problems with the guy, friendly with him, whatever. But he works his way up along with Chris McPartland, his assistant, and a few others. And all the way up his ranks comes Burke, who gets promoted again and again and again. And everybody says, well, Spoda did it. Duh. You think he's the only one that could just by single-handedly promote a cop all the way up the ranks when he's not in charge of the police? He's the DA. It's a separate organization. More people are involved in the promotion of Burke than has been exposed. They're in the police department. Many of them have quit or retired, but some are still there. They shouldn't be. All right? They knew all along what that man was. Right? We've done our work on that too, because people come to us and ask us the question you did: is there any connection? Yeah, there could be, and we'll look at it. But you see that Jimmy Burke, as he climbs the ranks, there had to be officials, cops noticed everything, right? That noticed what he was up to, that saw what he was doing with prostitutes, and did nothing about it. And they went all the way up the ranks. And I don't want to offend anybody here who's committing adultery. You go right ahead. It's your business, as they say in America. All right? But 3 out of 3 of the top cops who testified in Spoda's trial, I attended part of the trial, 3 out of 3 were in adulterous relationships at the top ranks. So you say, come on, it's their private business. It's America. Okay, well, that used to be a crime, still is on the books, okay? And it puts you, and you're in a position of trust and power with guns, it puts you in a position to be blackmailed, okay? And there is a blackmail in the police department, and that's one of the favorite ways that you get blackmailed. I'm gonna let your wife know what you're doing if you don't do what I say. Do it my way. Or it comes this way, it's a consensual blackmail. I'm cheating on my wife, I know you're cheating on yours. I leave you alone, you leave me alone. You wanna move up? Great. That's what I think was going on partly in the police department. And it worked its way up. So he would easily climb the ranks because the people supporting him were as corrupt as he was in that fashion. You don't want to hear it? Don't listen to me then. That's what I have to say. So that's how he got there. Everybody looked the other way. Now, Burke, I used the word at my press conference the other day, he was a dilettante of prostitutes. Okay? Well, he was. He loved prostitutes. And what he would do is he had a girlfriend who lived with him for almost 10 years, on and off. She was a madam working out of a hair salon in St. James and running her system through a beeper. In those days, there were beepers, if you remember. When I teach in Suffolk one night a week, and I've done that since 1984. And I just like to do it, but it used to be in the days when they had beepers, I could tell the drug dealers in my class. Right away, beep, 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 every 5 minutes, and they were running out, coming back in. So they used beepers, and that's how they would do the hookups. And she lived with Burke. He was essentially running a prostitution ring out of his house. All right, and they were male and female, all right? And they were good-looking people, allegedly. Depends who, I guess, eyes of the beholder, maybe, I don't know. But that's what I was told. And this thing went on, and nobody noticed it. Nobody noticed it. That beeper, by the way, was registered to a Jane Burke. There is no Jane Burke, living at 2 Samus Court, where he lived. Okay, so you figure the rest if you want to, okay? That person also had allegedly some connection with a house in Ronkonkoma. Isn't that around here? Yeah. Okay, so it's over here somewhere. and supposedly that's where the hookups took place. So then I had an independent witness confirm that. So I didn't just take that, from the ex-husband of this girl. This girl's initials match the initials that were shown the other day on the belt. Okay. Well, they said it's a belt. Okay. They did. Okay. So if you turn them around, they match her initials. Okay. So that doesn't mean it's her. We can't do that. We can't say, aha, I got him. Everybody's calling the DA now saying, guess what? We know who it is. That's one avenue you go down. I don't know. Maybe the belt's a man's belt, which would mean nothing to do with her initials. But if it's a female's belt and they match her initials, they should be looking at that. So I informed them of that. I put it in writing to them and told them they should be looking down that path.
Is she dead?
No, she's alive and well.
You said in the press conference that she had a child with Burke?
No, that's another prostitute.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That's another one.
Yeah.
Did that child
Number though?
Yeah, the child is in her 30s now. Oh. Okay. So he had this hookup with prostitutes that he liked. So one of the things I do to advance the investigation, and I really work at this, and you can imagine it's exhausting, is I help anybody who was connected to Burke, who was connected to the girls. In any way, I represent them. I'm willing to step up and help them and represent them pro bono. And I've done that over and over and over and over and over again for so many different people in this case. And they then tell me things that they're going to tell me. So that's how I gather some of the information I've gotten. So I use my own method of investigation. That's one of them. And so Loretta Rickenbacker, who you've all read about, that's the girl who he left his his gun in the car, gave her the key, she went home, took the gun, and then he got in trouble and got busted in rank twice, right? She was the girl. She was allegedly a prostitute on Albany Avenue over, if any of you know Albany Avenue in Amityville, it's prostitutes, drugs for many years, murders. It's a great street. For us, the defense bar. But in any event, she was walking there, and Burke was on a narcotics tour, and he saw her, and he seduced her, and then she became his girlfriend. And he would take her, dress her all up, and strut her to the police dinners and all that. You don't mean to tell me cops who notice everything didn't notice this? You know, this girl, she looked like Miss Nice? Come on. Right? That's like when they told us that Shannon's pants came off, her I call them trousers, but I'm old. You know, her jeans came off because the sticker bushes pulled them off. That's what he said. In a press conference, that's what he said. It's the same kind of nonsense. You didn't notice that that this man was coming, and she's African American, he's white. Cops noticed those things. Okay? But nobody noticed. And he would take the other one as well. And she's white. So what's going on here? Okay? And Loretta, I became her lawyer, and she told me that they would hook up together in a house in Ronkonkoma. And so I don't know that you can't say they're necessarily the same place as the other girl, but it's an interesting fact. And they would smoke crack together. So he was a crackhead, and he would peer out the windows to see if the cops were coming. So, and then they had a baby. Cops didn't notice the baby. All right? And off he goes. He keeps getting busted in rank, and right back up he goes. All right? So then he takes his friends, cops, firemen, and whatever. There was a bar over on Route 110. I forgot the name of it. What's it?
Crazy Donkey.
No, it was another name. But top floor, a typical New York operation, like in Manhattan. Top floor, it's usually a U-shaped bar or a circle bar. Everybody's just drinking and having a good old time and eating little things and going home. The bottom floor is where all the action is. And you get to go down there if you're certain people. Burke would go down there with these men that he would bring along with him, and they would party with prostitutes. All those prostitutes are dead except one. Okay? And she testified that Burke would actually bring men down there, hook up with her, and others as well. So that's the guy, and that's where Bissett would go to, by the way. He also visited that place. So there's all kinds of incredible connections of these people together. And remember, Peter Hackett was the former police surgeon of Suffolk County. That's right. So he wore he got a beautiful gold bar uniform. He got the brass. And he was a white shirt, and he had a badge, and they gave him one of those radio devices in his car, so he could call the cops whenever he needed to. So there's so much more, isn't there, huh? Right? That you could learn about this. It's fascinating. But anyway, there's another aspect which I don't know if I'm over time now. I don't mind, but if you don't, Emery.
Two things. You can go till a little after 8:30.
Okay.
Jim Burke, did you say earlier that he was involved with the killing of that little boy in Smithtown years ago?
Yes. He was part of the group. Some say he did not participate in the actual killing. We don't know. But this is not a nice kid. He's hanging around with those kids. He never was a nice kid. All right? And here he was very charming, very smooth. I knew him. When any of you remember the Ocean Beach scandal, when the cops in Ocean Beach, which is over on Far Island, they arrested a guy who was drunk, threw him into the little tiny police booth, and then kicked him in the stomach, and one of them did, and they didn't realize his belly was full of beer, so they burst his bladder and he almost died. And those 4 cops were indicted on that, the Ocean Beach cops, and I was the lawyer for one of them. And I won. I got it thrown out of court against him. Once I pulled peg out from under their table, the others got acquitted as well. They couldn't convict him anymore. So I was involved in the Ocean Beach case. And it was that case which led to some evidence I have in this case as well, from Ocean Beach. So
The press conference that you keep speaking about, when was that? Is there a way I can see it on TV?
well, there's two press conferences last Thursday. There was mine at 11:15 at police headquarters. They tried to block me and we refused to leave. And there's the police one. You can see both of them on the channels that you can pull up on your computer. Okay, you can see both of them. I know only one channel shows my whole 17-minute presentation on this. So, and yeah, I guess. So I mean, I said, how could you have a guy who's a dilettante of prostitutes investigating and running a prostitution ring out of his house, and I say so, investigating dead prostitutes? Does that make any sense? So something's wrong with that picture, that whole picture. But meanwhile, just shifting, I guess, gears a little bit, there's another aspect of the case. I don't know what value it has. It might not have any value, but it's a fascinating part of a very mixed up case. And that is that Mary Gilbert had 4 children: Shannon, Cherie, Stevie, and Sarah. And you'll see them at any of the press conferences we've held over the years. They show up. You know, when finally I found a place to bury Shannon, by the way. The cops wouldn't give us the bones. I had to fight, I had to go to court to get the bones. The county wouldn't give us the bones. We got the bones and we were able to bury her in a nice, somebody donated a plot for her in Amityville. And so we were able to bury her. And you can see the girls there, all those girls, they always show up. So I got to know them, you know, they were nice kids, I thought, and everything was good, you know, so on and so forth. Well, I was in Sweden, and I get the call, come home right now, Sarah Gilbert has murdered Mary, and her, you know, her other daughter. So I came home in July and of, what was it, 2016, I believe, and I then stepped in. I said, well, Mary's dead. I can't represent her anymore, but I can still help the family. So I became Sarah's lawyer for the murder of Mary. And I represented her throughout the murder trial up in Kingston, New York. So one of the things that emerged, contrary to the Netflix movie that's about to come out, completely contrary, is that Mary had a very bad experience as a mother, okay? It's probable that she was in part living off of Shannon's earnings in her field, okay? And I had some independent evidence of that. In addition, you know, Mary had done a lot of drugs in her time, so I don't know what that did to her, but she was, while she was living with the rest of the family, many of the kids were taken out of her hands and put in foster care, and then they came back and forth, so it was a mess. But her boyfriend was getting oral sex from Sarah on a daily basis for several years. And when Sarah finally revealed that to the mother did not throw the guy out, okay? Instead, she kept him there, and then when he finally beat her up, she threw him out, and then let him come back. And all the while, Sarah was living there. So you can start to understand Sarah's mindset. But there's something else that makes this even more interesting. Mary was a practicing black witch for 22 years. Okay? Her license plate said Wicca 22. So when I met her at the bar, I said to her, "Are you a witch?" And she said, "Yeah." So I figured she was one of these hippies, you know? She looked like the right age. You know, they worship nature, they like birds, things like that. So that's what I thought. You know, that's nice. You know, she seemed nice, she seemed a little, you know, sort of airy. So then I find out, though, later on, that she's a so-called black witch. That's different. And those are people who cast spells, and they you know, stick pins, and they do all this weird stuff. And they really they can be malicious, and they can be bad. And a lot of that, when they're hooked up with these so-called covens of people, there's a lot of sexual activity, a lot of intermingling, ritualistic sex, a lot of groupies and things like that. Sometimes I think it's a good excuse for that. But they're very popular on Long Island, these things. So Mary was up in Ellenville, but she would belong to all these different covens, and she practiced this witchcraft. So the kid is growing up, Sarah, thinking Mama is a witch, and Mama has powers. And then eventually the kid comes to the conclusion that Mama is a demon, and is possessed by a demon or several demons.
Oh, boy.
And then Sarah leaves and goes with a drug dealer when she's only 14. Her very first sexual experience was a rape by 2 boys. And she starts to use Molly, right? Which is an amphetamine type thing, okay? And smokes marijuana. I mean, that's it, okay? By 2014, she's completely off and she's hospitalized for her mental beliefs that she says in the records, I want to kill my mother, she's a demon. She had a son, I want to kill my son, he's possessed, and I want to kill my dog, and so on. And she says so. So they medicate her. What's the favorite solution? Just shoot her up with drugs and she'll be fine. And sure enough, she was, until it wore off, and then she'd go right back again. And she had all these delusions that she wrote songs for Eminem and Beyonce, and they dissed on her because they wouldn't give her credit for the songs. So Eminem possessed her dog, her little puppy dog, and she took the puppy dog when Eminem went into it, and in front of her 6-year-old son, she drowned the dog. Okay? And then they put her back in. She stayed there for several months. They wrote up the records where she's saying, I want to kill my mother, and this is why. And they said, well, okay, but if she's medicated, she's fine. They let her out in June and never bothered to check if she was taking her meds. She wasn't. And in July, she slaughters her mother. Not kills, slaughters. Okay? 227 stab wounds, bashed in head with a fire extinguisher, foam shot into her mouth, and her head partially cut off. And then her clothes were cut off, all because she had power. And every time she would stab the mother, she would see the mother's eyes open and talk, because the demon went back in. So she would take a cigarette break, arms got tired, and then she'd go back and do more to get rid of the demon. So I represented her. I brought one of the best psychiatrists in America, Dr. Alex Barday, in. He volunteered like Dr. Bodden did for me with the Shannon autopsy, the second autopsy. And Alex, a friend of mine, he testified on her behalf. They had a psychiatrist who had no idea what she was doing. We clobbered her. You would read the trial transcript and go, nobody in their right mind would find this kid to be sane. Insanity was the defense, and we lost. So Shannon's in prison, and I'm going home tonight as they're in my car. I have to have my briefs in by next week, so I'm finishing the appeal for Sarah. But that all happened because of Mary's involvement with witchcraft. So comes the question, could there be a connection between Mary's practice and the people she knows and it hangs around with and these killings? Here's an interesting twist, an interesting odd fact. When Shannon disappears, nobody knows she's dead. She's just gone for a day or two, okay? Mary and the kids get in the car from Ellenville, New York, long ride, drive all the way down to Oak Beach to find Shannon and knock on doors the following Sunday. They get all the way there, car filled with them. They get out of the car, they go by where Oak Beach Inn used to be, and in they go to the community. Mary refuses to go. She stays in the car. Why? Nobody knows Shannon's dead. We just want to know where our sister is. It's just an interesting fact. So you start to put all this together and say, could there be more than we're all looking at? I don't know. Again, I don't know. But it's an avenue that needs to be explored. Who knows where it's going to lead? Okay? So that's just another spin-off of the many fascinating case, isn't it? Right? Sir?
Investigating anything about the police department or any aspect of the case aside from the DNA?
I don't know. I only know that when there was a prostitute who came, I represented in this case probably about 10 different prostitutes in one way or another who were involved in some way with Burke or this one or that one. And there's a prostitute named Leanne who came forward, and I had a press conference about that. She says that she had oral sex with Burke in Oak Beach and then had intercourse with him in Oak Beach, but it was after the deaths of these people. It was after 2011. Okay, but we held a press conference. She wanted to come. She wanted to attend it and tell her story. So she did. And it created some stir, of course, as you can well imagine. So I became her lawyer for a variety of things. And one day I get a knock on my office door unannounced, and Detective Pat Portella, who was in charge of the investigation, is there, and he's there with an FBI agent. They want to talk to me. So I figured, great, this is going somewhere, finally. And Portella's the one who said to my investigator, I had an older gentleman who was a former homicide detective for Suffolk County, whose kids I taught when I was a history teacher as a young man. And that's how I knew him. And then later on, he ended up working in a store when he retired of a girl who I had as an associate lawyer in my firm. So it was just a lucky coincidence. I bumped into him and I said, Bill, you want to help me with this case? And he stepped up and helped me with this. So he took a binder of very carefully organized contradictions in the transcripts between Hackett, his wife, his kids. I didn't do all the other ones. We didn't have time. We didn't get to it. And it was like this thick, and I did line by line contradictions, self-contradictions amongst and between them. And it took it took forever. It's a big fat thing. And we delivered the binder to the police department. They rejected it. They refused to look at it. And Portella came out and told my investigator, John Ray will get those tapes over my dead body. Okay? So you understand what they're fighting. So up shows this guy who I thought was my enemy. And there he is, unannounced. And I happened to be there, lucky. So invited him in, hey guys, come on in, let's talk. And they said, listen, here's why we're here. We're here because we want to tell you, your client, Leanne, to stop calling this other girl. They were competing for the affections of a lawyer named Lindsay Henry. Lindsay Henry was the son of Patrick Henry, the former DA of Suffolk County, and also a state Supreme Court judge later on after he got out, okay? And Lindsay Henry was having an affair with Leanne and with this other girl, both of who became clients of mine.
Oh my God.
So, I've done a lot of work, take my word. Fascinating work.
He gets all the dope.
But anyway, they come to tell me that Leanne is bothering the other girl and calling her and incessantly, and she's got to stop because they were competing. They were angry at each other.
Oh
Right?
my God.
Had each other arrested and all
It's
this.
amazing.
So I said, sure, I'll be delighted to do that. No problem. I'll tell her to cut it out. But while you're here, fellas, I have big boxes in the bag. Would you like to look at them? There's no real clear answer to that question. So I said, listen, I've always been cooperative with the cops. I know you don't like some of the things I've said in public, but personally, I think cops are great guys, and I'd be willing to work with you. You can have whatever you want. Just call me. I said, I have Shannon's, I have about, I forget how many, 8 to 13 different cell phones of Shannon. I have her computer. The cops never seized any of them. Okay? They knew where they were. They never got any of them. We got into some of the computer stuff. It was very hard to get into phones. And I hired big companies to do this. But we couldn't, they weren't very useful. But the cops, I said, I have them. If you have a company that is more sophisticated that can do this, it'd be great. But if you want to see them, they're here. And I have a lot of other things too. Never came back. Never asked for any of the documents, never came back. So that's the extent of the FBI's involvement that I know of. And that's the extent of the police department's involvement.
It's a shame.
Yeah. Several people have reported Lindsay Henry as the serial killer because he's so involved with all these prostitutes as well. But I don't really know. But he lives in Oak Beach. Yeah.
Do you have any reason to believe that Shannon was killed by the same person as the other girl?
Yes.
What?
There are 11 dead people, one 18-month-old child, one cross-dressing Asian male who may have been a prostitute, okay? And that leaves you with 9. And 5 of them are identifiable prostitutes. So when you find all prostitutes dead in the same area, your mind says, inference, but not guaranteed.
What's the cause of death?
There's difference between cause of death and manner of death.
That's right.
If you look at a death certificate, okay? And the cops are not revealing any of that to anybody directly about the other girls. Shannon's is, I go and I find Michael Bodden, and the reason I know Michael is that he used to be the Suffolk County medical examiner when I was a young lawyer. So I knew him a little bit that way. I had a homicide or 2 with him. But his brother George, his brother George is a big guy, and he's about 70 years old. He's got a big long ponytail down in here, and he wears shorts all the time, even in December. And look at me. Do I look small to you? Well, I used to be 210 pounds, and I was built like that when I was a young man. I played linebacker for the Long Island Giants, and there was a semi-pro football team in those days. And one of my opponents, who was against me, and he played for a team in the city, was George Bodden, and we were friends. So I called him up and said, can I get Michael to do an autopsy with me on Shannon's bones? And that's what we did. So Michael came out, and that's when we found the hyoid bone that I was talking about,
right.
with the hole in it. By the way, when I found the bone, it wasn't an indent as it was reported it was a hole that went right through it.
What would cause that?
All right? It's hard to know. A needle could cause it. Some other object could cause it. I don't know what else could cause it.
Okay.
But it was interesting. So that's how Michael got into the case. I don't know if that answered your question. I forgot what your question was. Cause of manner of death. So we were able to say that it was consistent with homicide. The other girls, they're homicides. We don't know the manner of death, except that it leaked out to me from Dormer through a source I had that one of the girls had her underwear stuffed down her throat. So that's asphyxiation, not strangulation. Does that help you a little? All right.
Why did the phones ping? Like, was Burke's phones down, or?
I don't know if they pinged Burke's phones, but the phone that there was a man who called, who was the girl upstate from Lockwood up in Buffalo.
Megan? Maureen?
Say the names. Yeah, Bartholomew. Thank you. I'm getting old. I forget. I do. I really do. Just it's short-term memory loss. She was up in Lockwood, and she gets murdered, and she's one of the 4. Excuse me. And the murderer gets her cell phone and calls the sister in Lockwood, and calls, I think, 8 times. And each time the calls come from, they can ping them, and they come from Times Square, Empire State Building, 42nd Street, different places like that, and they only last just enough time that they can't be immediately locked on so somebody could go there and catch the person making the call. So somebody was very familiar, and amongst crowded places where it's very hard to trace the pings, all the calls were made. And they get progressively nastier. They start out with, are you a half-breed like your sister? Okay, and then they get to the point at the end by the last call, and I believe the police were taping him at this point, but I'm not positive. They get to the last call, and the last call he says some disgusting, horrible things about what he's doing to her from behind, and watching, you had to see your sister's face as she was dying. And he leaves that message. Now that voice, there's a lawyer who claims he heard the tapes. He's up from upstate. He's lying. He never heard the tapes. And they fired him because he lied on TV and said he heard the tapes. He connected him with a young middle-aged man, and he just made it up. He's a nut. So there's nuts everywhere. I mean, my God. So anyway, I then took Hackett's voice, because I had it from, I videotaped his depositions. We downloaded, put it onto a disc, and we said, we'll go up to see them. And I called them in Lockwood. They said, come on up. And I went up and I said, have they ever played to you Peter Hackett's voice? And they didn't think that the police ever did. So I said, well, I'm gonna play it for you. This family, like Mary's family, is so screwed up, they all of a sudden blew up on us for no reason we could understand and said, F you, don't come here, don't bother us, we're not talking to you again, and hung up. So they never heard Peter Hackett's voice through us. And to this day, I don't know why. But fascinating, huh? So am I making it worse for you? Is it more mysterious than ever? Sir?
Counselor, I want a boat.
Oh, my.
Hoping sounds pretty good. Is there any hoping? We have crossed paths. Probably don't recognize me. I'm probably a NAFRO. I had that on my shirts. When I worked in the H. Lee Dennison building for the sheriff's office.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Retired. Just going to throw a little different scenario in there. We talk about the FBI. I was curious, about sharing with the sheriff's office, because now every individual arrested in Suffolk County, of course, goes through the sheriff's office.
Right.
And through the PD. Just throw a different scenario. Does the name Robert Schumann sound familiar to you?
No.
Robert Schumann.
Oh, wait, he was a killer, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Robert Schumann was a postal worker.
Right.
Worked at a fix store. And
He was a mercy killer, wasn't he?
no, he was arrested on a state road in Suffolk County
Okay.
with dead prostitute, or maybe two dead prostitutes. He was arrested by a state trooper, and they were wrapped in burlap.
And they were what?
Wrapped in burlap.
Yeah.
I'm really curious if this information is shared, if anybody.
I've never heard it. First I've heard it.
How long ago?
I don't know. So.
The dates I'm a little shady with. I think maybe he was arrested in the 90s.
It was the late 90s.
Yeah. Well, that would fit. I mean, some of these girls, two of them could have been as far back as the early 90s that they disappeared. Nobody knows for sure. The head and arms of one of them is found, Jessica Taylor, is found in Oak Beach. The trunk is found, another trunk is found in Manorville in the woods off of Halsey Manor Road. And then the third trunk was more recently found in Hempstead Lake State Park. So, I don't know. It's
By the
fascinating.
way, you're a very respected attorney in all legal affairs.
Oh, thank you.
Regardless of the police force.
Oh, fascinating, right? You'll see, I'm going to, right now, I'm you probably saw me, I got that controversial case with the monkey see, monkey do case with the African-American kids. I'm their lawyer. But, so that, I didn't make a lot of friends in Middle Island. But I'm also the lawyer on the, what's his name out there? Wally Backman, the Ducks pitcher. I'm the victim's lawyer in that, so I'm doing that trial every day. I'm out there watching the trial because I'm her civil lawyer. We brought the lawsuit against him and against the Ducks. So I'm stuck with all that stuff. I'm running around and trying to keep up with these cases as well. So it's getting a little hard to do, but I'm doing it.
Hi.
But one more thing is, you'll see I think in February 21st, there's a lawyer in Suffolk County who's indicted. His name is Vincent J. Trimarco Jr., and he was indicted for stealing $2 million from a little girl in an estate case, and he built the Emporium over in Patchogue with that money. And he's about to go on trial. I am the chief witness against him. I investigated that case all by myself. I put together the documentation to trace the monies, and I was fought every inch of the way, and Spoda's office declined twice to investigate the case, except very lightly. And even when the surrogate judge asked that investigation to take place, he didn't do it. And so finally, the United States Attorney stepped in and the FBI, and they indicted this guy, and I'm the chief witness. So keep your eye on that one.
Did you say that
You had to wait for, she was first, I'm sorry.
No, that's not, okay. Did a private investigator ever offer to help you in any way with Shannon's case or?
I had no offers of help from any, I mean, a lot of people offer,
No,
but
like
no
license.
professionals have come forward. One guy had he passed away though, he died of cancer, and he had a little operation that's where we ran the phones.
Right.
He was fairly sophisticated at what he did, but he passed away, so I don't know, that's it. So many people have passed away in this case, it's stunning, just absolutely amazing how many people are gone. And how many girls they're either prostitutes or they're on their way to that, have died.
Yeah.
There's, you have no idea. It's amazing. It's a shame. That lady was next, then you, then you,
I just have a very small question.
and then you.
Did you say that you're representing a party in the Monkey See, Monkey Do?
Yeah, I'm representing the 4 African American kids. Well, I said you, and then I said you, sorry.
Yeah, there was a murder of a prostitute. Actually, the girl came from Holbrook, not too far from here, only a few blocks. And, they convicted a homeless man for her murder. And I think he was finally convicted. I can't remember, it was just a couple of years ago. And I believe it was out in Manorville. But when you read the case in the paper, it was so screwed up with the cops. There were two police officers that were actually.
Oh, I know that case, yeah, I know what you're saying.
Not being police anymore.
Right.
One of them actually had a relationship with this prostitute. Was there any connection with
Not that we know of. We haven't been able to make any. Sure. We tried, but there wasn't anything I could find. There was another.
There was the house in Oak Beach where has been historically known as a place where a lot of law enforcement and elected officials would go and party and have sex and do drugs. Is that house still up, or has that house ever been forensically tested?
You don't know which is the real house.
Okay.
Nobody knows for sure. Everybody has a different identity. Leanne picked out a house, and it turned out to be a Democratic Party chief in Suffolk County. It was his house, but we don't know if she was right or not. When she had these trysts with Burke at these places, so we have no idea. But different people say different places. There are a number of places. Think about it. What I've told you about. There are a number of places that this could be. So. You may have had your. I forgot.
So during the Story McPartland federal trial, a very reliable individual said that a witness had seen her with Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein.
With Jeffrey Epstein. Well, you'll be interested to know that when I go to Sweden, my life partner, she's an opera singer. She's a Swedish opera singer, so she knows all the elites in Sweden because she sung in the Swedish Royal Opera as a diva. So we know everybody from the princes down. And one of a friend of mine and hers is the woman. Her name is Barbara Enbaum. You can look it up. And she was the madam who was soliciting all the Swedish girls that Epstein got. And Barbara's been in my house, we had dinner with her. Her boyfriend, by sheer coincidence, was also a client of mine, and he's got some connections, but he was a client of mine, and that just by coincidence, we put it all together. Barbara is no longer a friend, but it turns out that she ran an organization called BBB, Barbara's Best and Brightest, and she would gather up all these young, beautiful Swedish girls who went to school and wanted to be ambitious and come to America and get a job. She would place them in some very good jobs, and some with Epstein. And one of the princes, the royal family of Sweden, he met his girlfriend and now wife through Barbara. And this girl was a soft porn star. Now she's a princess. So much for the royal families. Okay, thank God we live in a republic. But and so I'm over there now actively trying to get some of those girls to come forward, and we will help them. So that's what in fact, when the African American case came, I was in Sweden doing that work, and I had to fly home to represent the African Americans. I had to cut my trip short.
The other thing related to that is on Joseph Brewer. So allegedly during the 90s, some of the Gilgo victims, specifically Megan Waterman, was named as having been there as a teenage girl.
Oh.
And that he had told someone that was his girlfriend. So I did the math at the time. She would have been 17. He would have been obviously have you heard anything about this? Because
No, it's the first I heard of it.
Pedophile ring, sexual pedophile ring, possibly.
That's the first I've heard of it. You can feed me that information, I'll do what I can with it, but it's a lot of work.
So back to the other victims before that were wrapped in burlap. Now, my understanding is that there are 4 sex workers that were found in Jersey, in Atlantic City.
Yeah, but they've not been able to make any
They
connection.
haven't made
No.
any connections.
there's 8 or 9 that are found up in New Bedford, Massachusetts, along the waterline more or less, where Lindsay Henry lived, and also served on a boat when those girls disappeared. But, so that's the connection that all the bloggers are making about him. But I don't know more than that, you know, just can't tell you. So, yeah,
Were
anyway.
you consulted for the movie that's coming out at all?
I was. They asked me to dinner or lunch, and they took me over to a big fancy restaurant on the west side in Manhattan, and they brought the guy who wrote the book, Bob Kulka, Lost Girls. He gave up his rights to them so they could have that movie. And I guess it was a wise move because he had wrote a bestseller book, and now he made a movie. Remember in his book, people say, oh, Bob knows all these facts. Bob was not investigating the case from a forensic point of view. He was doing a sociological study of sex workers. So he kind of has a light touch on his knowledge of the underlying. I'm friends with him, but you know that's as far as it goes. So he invited me with them and said, "Come on, sit down. You sign off your rights. We'll put you in the movie. We'll give you a name. Your name will appear on on the credits as a producer or something." And I said, "No, thank you. I'm not doing this for the money. I'm not getting paid, and I think it would have polluted it for me to do that."
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and I said, besides, from what I could tell from the script that they were talking about, they hadn't written it yet, but they were on their way. And I met with the writer and the producer and so on. It sounds to me like you're making her into a feminist hero in the nature of Erin Brockovich. And this is Erin Brockovich II, that Mary went out and fought against the big, evil police department. And finally, the story begins when Shannon disappears. The movie ends when the bones are discovered. So I'm not in it until 8 days later, so I'm not in the movie anyway.
Right.
But I know the real Mary, that is not the real Mary.
Right.
Okay? And I told him that. I said, listen, you can write what you want, but if you're going to tell the truth, it's a very different truth. Nobody wanted to hear that, including Kulker. And when I mentioned the witchcraft, it was, oh, don't. That's not in this. So I'm not in the movie, and I'm not part of the movie. But I think the good thing about the movie is that it keeps the pressure on the police, just by the fact that they showing the police in a bad light.
Right.
So it has its value. Okay, and it's a
Right.
drama. Remember, it's not supposed to be exactly right. It's
Right.
an actress and so on. So they're not. That's as far as it goes. I
Based
suppose.
on a real story. Right.
Yeah, but they're stirring the interest. Remember, the police call this meeting with the letters only 4 days before the court is supposed to decide the tapes, which, if I win, will make it look like the police were covering it up. And they originally were releasing the movie in February. Now it's March, but they were releasing it in February, so it's only a few days before the release of the movie. So. Was this just as I called it, pablum, a stunt by the police to say, hey, look, we're cooperating with the public? Or is it more, intelligent that what they're doing is trying to flush the killer out with some evidence, which is very possible here. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but it's interesting. Sir.
Would you say that's why they released the new evidence so recently?
Possibly that's why.
It's not new evidence.
Possibly. Don't know. We never heard about that belt before, But the lady whose initials match, by the way, did, according to people I've talked to who knew her personally, did have her initials engraved on things. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know where it's going. We'll hope the police do something good with that.
John, is that a truth to cops that committed suicide or attempted suicide on the Burke's watch?
I don't know. I don't know about that, But Burke is just, he's a dangerous guy. And he's out. He's on the street, Matter of fact, while he was still in the halfway house in Brooklyn, waiting to get released and being a good boy, he bought tickets to the Rolling Stones concert. So, says a lot. Right?
Do you think Spoda's a dangerous man also?
No, I do not think Spoda is a dangerous man. I don't.
Do you think he's innocent?
No. He's found guilty.
Well, I understand that.
All right, so he's guilty. All right, that's what the jury said. Yeah, he's appealing it, of course, you know, but the poor man got sucked into this trip of power, and, you know, he's like every King Lear, you know, or Macbeth. He's a tragedy, right? Yeah, I represent murderers. I represent every kind of person who's got problems in their lives, and I like them. Because they're children of God just like you. Okay? They've done their sins, they'll pay for it someday, but, and maybe on earth and maybe somewhere else, that's not my job to judge. Every one of those people, no matter how horrible they were born innocent like you. Something went wrong like with Sarah. And we can say what we want, but they possess a soul like you do and a body like yours. And so, I like them. If they did it to my own, I wouldn't be able to think about it. But I can say that without any qualms whatsoever.
But you're an officer of the court.
Right.
So you take an oath for the Constitution. And if you know that the DA has violated the Constitution, why would you find favor with that?
I didn't. I never said that. I just said I like the man. And I do.
Separated the crimes.
So. All right, I guess we're over time, right? All right, thank you.